we're done. Take the time maybe to fill this out for us. We are in the process of planning our 2015 events, speakers, and we are looking for your input. As our members, we really want to make sure that we're doing for you what you want us to do. So these are very, very important for us. So if you're going to take the time, that would be great. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, welcome. I want to thank our sponsors. We have sponsors that help us bring these events to you. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. This event is sponsored by Ben Broadbent and Jones & Ross, so we thank them very much. So thank you. We don't have anybody here this evening, I don't think. But okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get into our introductions. On my left here, I have Troy Reinhardt. Troy Reinhardt is our moderator and host. I call him our Oprah Winfrey. So Troy is a partner with Northwest Quadrant Management here in Bend. They have offices in Bend, Portland, and John Day, Oregon. He is also the co-host of the syndicated radio program Financial Focus, so if you haven't heard him, be sure to tune into him. Troy is a native of Bend, a graduate of Bend High School, and a proud Oregon State Beaver.
I'm so proud of you.
Troy earned his BS in Forest Management and also undertook graduate studies in economics, and he is the past chairman of the Bend Chamber Board of Directors. On my right is our guest, Tom Bedell, and for those of you who don't know Tom is the owner of Two Old Hippies Guitars, where they produce very high-end, and I happen to know that personally.
You own one?
No, I don't own one, but I do have a wonderful man who happens to work for Tom Bedell.
Oh, there you go.
So, high-end Breedlove Guitars, Bedell, Weber Guitars, and they also produce high-end mandolins and ukuleles. So, I actually have a really nice bio on Tom, and I was going back and forth, and I really do want to read it for you, because I want you all to have a sense of kind of where Tom's been, and then I know Troy is really going to dig into it, but I really do want to read this for you. So Tom Bedell is a self-made guitar and fishing tackle tycoon, believe it or not. Also, like I said and mentioned, he's the owner of Two Old Hippies, which was formerly Breedlove Guitars. As a high school student growing up in Spirit Lake, Iowa, Tom quit teaching lessons at a local music store when the owner wouldn't pay him a sales commission, correct?
Yep.
So he then, let me see, I lost my place. He then opened his own store. A year later, at the 1964 NAMM show, he introduced the Bedell Guitar line. After a great success, the Bedell Guitar Company went dormant as Tom went to college, worked briefly as a political consultant, and then took the reins of the fishing tackle business his father had founded. After selling Pure Fishing in 2005, he retired briefly but said, "I didn't like being out of the game." He and his wife Molly subsequently launched Two Old Hippies, which is, in addition to guitars, produces a line of apparel. In 2011, Tom purchased Breedlove Guitars in Bend, and now I'm going to let them tell you the rest of the story.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction, and I will give the mic to Tom here in a second and let him hold the tight mic, and I'll just make sure I speak loud so you can hear, because what he says is the most important part of goes on in the conversation tonight. But we are going to have a conversation. There will be an opportunity for you all to ask questions when you want to ask questions as we go through. So make sure that you put those on. The format for today is to really try to, and as I shared with Tom when we talked briefly on the phone this week, is the format of these is, I came to the chamber talking about starting something like this because I was born and raised in Bend, and there's lots of people in Bend who are great entrepreneurs, great business people, have done wonderful things that I had known my whole life, and I don't know Tom, but some of the people we've interviewed before, I'd known my whole life, but I'd never talked to them about business. I'd never talked to them about success. I'd never talked to them how they got there in the meandering path that they took to get there. So we're going to try to go down that road a little bit today and bring out some of the stuff, not so much the nuts and bolts of business, but the nuts and bolts of success, nuts and bolts of who makes Tom who he is today. So does that sound fair to you?
Whatever you want to do.
All right, well, I'm going to give you the mic, and then we'll go from there. You know, many times in our lives, we get nice introductions when we go to things, and Robin did a wonderful job today. But I guess my first question for you today is, how do you describe yourself, what you've done, and what you do?
Live life to the fullest.
Live life. Well, that is an important thing to do. How
I
do
know you want a longer answer than that. Okay, can I confess right at the beginning?
Well, that's good to get it off your chest early.
Yeah, well, let's come clean here, and then we'll figure out how to get through the rest of the night. I believe in my heart, if life is not about me, but it's about everybody else, then I'll be a much happier person. And if I have those values in my company, and so the purpose of my company is to better the lives of the people that are part of my company. In this case, in our new company, we call Two Old Hippies. In my fishing tackle company, we call co-workers. But if my whole purpose for being is to better their lives, I'll be successful. If my whole purpose of life is for them to better my life, I'm just going to be a shit. So why not focus on everybody else and give your heart, your soul, your management. Get rid of the power, get rid of all of the games, and just deal with empowerment, and success will come your way.
Or were you born that way, or how did you develop that kind of ethos?
Buddha showed up at my doorstep.
But does it come from...
Is that okay if we just have fun tonight? I mean,
yeah.
Serious, right? Yeah. Okay.
But and I agree with you. The humor is, especially when we pick on ourselves, there's some of the best humor that there is. Keeping it humble. If you can't laugh at yourself, you can't laugh at anybody else. But you know, there's lots of people who go through life that don't believe that and are successful, maybe not the way you and I want to be. And I agree with what you say in business. But where does that come from? Where does your ethos come from? Did it come from your parents?
Probably. You know, it's interesting. I grew up in a town called Spirit Lake, Iowa, and my great-great-grandmother in 1870 moved to Spirit Lake, Iowa, where my office is. I still have my family trust and my family office there in Spirit Lake, and it's located on a property of one of the first settler families that had moved there in 1857, lived there, and their last name was Marble, and the name of my place is Marble Lake Ranch. It's a ranch is an exaggeration for Iowa. It's a 140-acre wilderness area on a lake. So when I think about the traditions of my life, similar to some of you, and I know Pat and a lot of you here are very active in what has transition been from a 10,000 population community to what's going to become a 100,000+ community. All the time that I lived there, worked there, and helped build our business and help build our community, I realized that our community was my family, and it was the families that had moved there after the Sioux Indians had been driven off by the cavalry and all of that bad history we can talk about another time. What our town was how our family invested in that town. And that I could blame the town, I could criticize the town, I could do whatever, but if I better be looking in the mirror. Because it was my parents and my grandparents and my great-grandparents and me that were deciding what that town was. And once you get that perspective, all of a sudden, you take ownership in caring and sharing and being responsible, right? Is that fair to say? That's what makes Ben so special. This place, I just sold it. I had a place in Aspen, and the place was stunning. I had a ranch, 600 some acres, horses, all that stuff. But the culture in Aspen, the people were all about themselves. And coming to Bend, you get all that outdoor recreation, you get the great climate, you get everything you get in Aspen, but you get good people. And you get a great place to live. I am so happy to be here. I can't tell you how happy I am to be here. I don't know how I got off of that.
good point.
Yeah.
Does culture attract culture? Because Vail is a much different community than Bend is from the status of culture. Does culture attract culture? Does just good people who care about each other get attracted to each other? And people that don't care about each other get attracted to each other and get pulled together?
I don't know.
Well, how do you
How do you know that?
well, part of it is how do you attract people, good people into your business?
Oh, because if they are good people, I fire them. Nobody has a choice. That sounded bad, but it's what I do. Nobody has a choice in our company to ruin the quality of life for everybody else. Nobody has that choice. You can be absolutely the best craftsman at building beautiful guitars, and if you treat people poorly and ruin their day at work, they are not welcome in my company. It's not about, I do good work so you can put up with me treating people bad. No. You lead good life and do good work. When I bought Breedlove in November 30th of 2010, it was a bad culture. Well, it's broke. That's why I bought it. It was bankrupt. That's why the opportunity came my way. But you put a collection of carpenters that try to build guitars in a room. There were girly posters. There was bad language. There was disrespect for one another. And when I showed up the day I closed the deal and got everybody in a room, and I started talking about values and how we were going to treat one another, and that I wasn't going to do drug testing, and it wasn't my place to tell people whether they should smoke pot or not, but they were going to quit smoking on their breaks at lunch, and they were going to quit treating each other this way and that way, and that was the ground rules. And either you wanted to be part of my family with my rules, or you didn't. And, you know, over the course of the 4 years, my guess is there's been probably 20 people we've had to let go because they did not want to live by those rules. But they don't have a choice. Do your kids have a choice in your family? Or do you set rules and standards about behavior that says, this is how we're going to live? If you're going to be part of our family, which you won't really have a choice because biologically there you are, but you're going to fit those rules. That's the way it's going to be. And if you don't like it, tough. And those kids turn out to be good kids and happy kids, right? And it's the families that don't do that where the kids don't know what to do. What am I talking about?
No, that's it's all true. It's all true and good stuff.
Yeah.
So you look at the people that work for you as part of your family?
They are. I'm responsible for, I'm not. Together, we're responsible for their family's well-being, the money that they buy their groceries with, the college education of their kids. We pay, in the guitar industry, which is very tough from a profit point of view, we pay $3 an hour more than every other guitar factory in America that I know of. You know why? You can't live on $12 an hour. You can't support a family. You can't enjoy Mount Bachelor and the Cascade Lakes and all that stuff. We pay everybody's health care. I have so many of our people that say, don't buy our health care, give us the money. And I say, no. You're working in a workshop. You can get hurt. You've got families at home. So we pay 100% of the health care for everybody that works for us. You don't have an option. So we choose those values. I think that's important.
It is. It's very important.
Yeah.
So when you look, if somebody was to ask you, which I will, who are your role models? Who do you look up to? Who gives you? Because we all get out of bed every day and we try to motivate ourselves, but there's other people around us that help us motivate, that we model and we want to be more like. Who are those people for you? Or things?
Wow, that's a long list. My mom. My dad is an incredible human being and very successful at everything he's done. He started the fishing tackle business that I took over in 1979. But my mom is who I would most like to be. She raised 3 kids with unconditional love. Today, she's 91 years old, and there has not been a day in her life where if there was something she could do for me, she wouldn't do it. I mean, a human being that is that dedicated to affect the life of somebody else in a positive way. Incredible. So, if you ever want to compliment me someday, when you meet my mom, if you ever get a chance, say, wow, you're a lot like her, that would make me happy. My dad's been hugely successful, and many of the values that I run our company by come from him. So, maybe the combination maybe of those two would be good. I don't want to get weird about religion, but I do really like Buddhism. I'm not a chanter or, I don't talk to my grandmother in heaven or whatever. But the concept of being more interested in other people than you are yourself, I think it's a very positive trait. And my guess is, I'm sure most of you are Christian in here, that's probably a Christian thing too.
Yeah.
Right? So we don't need to put labels on it. It's just a neat way to live. It's to care about other people more than you care about yourself. This may sound silly, but you're born with nothing and you die with nothing, and what you do in the middle, if it's all about materialism, I'm not sure that's worthwhile. I think it's more worthwhile to leave love and heart and peace behind. So that would be an inspiration. I think everybody you're with every day. I mean, gosh, you get up in the morning and say, how can I make a difference today? I don't know if that was an answer.
No, that's outstanding. I mean, I always learn so much when I talk to people like you and Walter and think about and reflect on how I think about things and how people. So you've been successful, and you obviously have had a passion for music and guitars for a considerable period of time. How did you get that passion?
Am I the oldest guy in the room? Is anybody else 64?
Yeah. He's very deep.
So, the reason I asked this question is, we were doing a bunch of branding work on Bedell Guitars, and I kept talking about why Bedell Guitars and why me and Bedell Guitars, and all the young people that are coming and looking at me and going like, why is that relevant to me? So let me answer your question, but it won't be relevant to you guys. I was born in 1950. The Leave It to Beaver period of the 50s and the early 60s, you guys can't imagine. Everybody was so frickin' pure, perfect, and everybody behaved, everybody was happy. When you watch that Leave It to Beaver show, that was my family. That's how I grew up, okay? I mean, I could walk in the grocery store with no money in my pocket and buy a popsicle, and the grocery store guy would say, when you get your quarter, bring it back in, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I'm serious. And nobody was worried about any of us walking around town or going over to a friend's house, or there was no security. Okay, I graduated from high school. I didn't even know what pot was. I hadn't had a drink and I was a virgin. How's that? Now, how many people can claim that information? That was the Leave It to Beaver time, okay? Well, my mother, when I was young, made me take piano lessons from Mrs. Martin. You know, that was the forced family fun thing. If I was going to be a good kid, I needed to learn all these different things. The parents make you do that to be good parents. So I took 8 lessons and I said, no. Well, so my mom sold the piano. She goes, if you're not going to play the piano, then I'm going to sell it. So she sold it. The neighbors across the street, I I don't know, maybe it's like this in Bend, I don't know, but when I was growing up, we had our neighborhood and we were in each other's houses, we ate at each other's tables. My mom would be calling around the neighborhood. Oh, this was even back. Am I getting boring? Or
No, you're
No.
not.
Okay, this was even back when the operator had the guitar plugs that you put in the, so you'd call the operator and say, I'm looking for my mom. She's at the hairdresser, and she'd plug the phone into the hairdresser and you'd find your mom. This was before the dial thing, right? So you guys don't know about all that, but it's crazy. Okay, so my neighbors had a piano, and I was probably 10, 11 years old. And I started after school, I'd go down there, and I started playing by ear on the piano. And it was just when rock and roll was starting and folk music was starting. So 3-4 nights a week, my mom would call over to Virginia Hanson and say, is Tom over there? Yeah, he's down on the piano. Send him home, it's time for dinner. They send me home. So for my 11th birthday, there's a piano in the house with a ribbon on it that says you can only play this an hour a day. So she reversed the psychology. Okay? Then I got a cheap guitar, and for my 12th birthday, I don't know why I'm telling you all this stuff, but will you bear with me? Okay, for my 12th birthday, I've got an older brother, younger sister. I'm suffering from that middle kid syndrome that we all know about. There's no presents for me under the tree. And my sister opens her presents, and my brother opens his presents. My parents open stuff that's come to them. And I'm starting to go, feeling sorry for myself. What did I do wrong? And as a kid, that's impactful, right? Like, why not me? And my dad turns to my mom and he goes, oh, honey, didn't we forget one present? She goes, yeah. And he leaves the living room and he goes out and he walks in with a Fender Stratocaster guitar.
Oh.
Blonde, 62. Now, just to tell you about this guitar, if I had kept that guitar and owned it today, it is worth $75,000. He paid $300 and some for it then. This was like the gift of a lifetime. So I married this guitar, played it nonstop, and the next year I started giving guitar lessons in the local music store. And the local music store had very little students, but when I started teaching, we filled it up. Every 30 minutes was full. Why? I didn't teach out of the Bell Bay book that teaches you how to play Old Lang Syne and I don't know what all those silly little songs were. I taught people how to play rock and roll. And so the kids would go home and they'd love it and they'd practice and they were learning the music that they wanted to play. Well, am I going on too long?
No, you're doing it.
Okay. So the students were there, they were buying guitars, so I'm getting $1 an hour, she's getting $2 an hour. No, I'm getting $1 an hour, she's getting $4 an hour for the lessons. And I go to her and I say, you're selling all these guitars, or you're filling up the time, you're paying me $1 an hour. I'm 13 years old. I said, I want a 10% commission on the guitars, and I want half the money for the lessons. She goes, no. I go, okay, then I quit. Mrs. Courier was her name. Very nice lady. So I go home and I say to my parents, would you mind if I set up a guitar studio in my house? What would you say if your kids asked you that? Of course, right? So I set up a guitar studio and I go to my dad and I say, Dad, I need guitars to supply these people because I can make a couple bucks a lesson teaching guitar, but I can make a bunch of money if I sell guitars. So Dad goes, well, let's try to find you some guitars. So I go into his office and he had a telex machine. Do you guys know what a telex machine is? No, most of you don't. It was a deal where you put a piece of paper, a strip of paper you'd run through a machine, and basically you type out Morse code. You'd punch the letters on this machine and they'd punch holes in this tape. And you'd feed the tape back through, and there was actually a hard cable that went underneath the ocean from the west coast of the United States over to Japan, and it would send this telex cable. I mean, you guys think faxes are outdated. This is an old telex machine, all right? So I sent a telex over to Ashiki-san, who was an agent that was helping my dad buy some snaps and swivels for fishing tackle leaders. And I asked him if he would find some guitar factories and see if he could get me some guitars. So John F. Kennedy was shot in November of 1963. I was 13 years old. My first samples from Ashiki showed up on that day. I just remember it because who doesn't remember where you were and what you were doing when John F. Kennedy was shot, right? So the guitars come in. I had gone to a local shop and found a source to get some decals made with my name on it. So Bedell Guitars and my younger sister learned how to put the decals on the guitars. I didn't know anything about business, so I just doubled the price. Hired a friend that had a driver's license to take me around. And this, by the time all this had happened, my birthday's in January, so I was 14 actually by the time I did this. We started calling on music stores, and every store we went to bought my guitars. Why did they buy them? I had no overhead. All the other people supplying guitars to those stores had warehouses and sales reps and financial people and all these different overhead costs. So their costs were twice mine. So I basically showed up with the same guitars because they were coming out of the factories in Japan at half the price. Everybody I called on bought them. So at age 14, I bring in 500 guitars, then I bring in 1,000 guitars, then I bring in 3,000 guitars. And all of a sudden, I've got a pretty good business going, right? So, age 16, some of the people don't pay their bills. Can you imagine that? Now, I don't know what I'm doing, so what do? I go in and grab inventory off their floor, and I've got amps stacked at home, and drum sets stacked at home, and all this stuff, and I go, I'm going to open up a music store. So I kept my wholesale company. I opened up a music store in Okoboji, Iowa. 3 months later, I opened up a second store in Spencer, Iowa. At age 16, I was doing about $500,000 a year in revenue. And I went to the school and convinced them for me to set up a deck program so I could work half-time and study half-time. But it was an age of rock and roll. The Beatles showed up on February 9, 1964 on Ed Sullivan. And I'm telling you, our culture changed. Completely changed. There were garage bands everywhere. I was in a band. We played every Friday and Saturday night from age 14 until I graduated from high school. Life was wonderful. It was wonderful. My parents let me travel all over southern Minnesota, eastern South Dakota, and northern Iowa with a bunch of guys in a band every weekend and never worried about it. Would you let your kids do that now in high school? No. Heck, you wouldn't trust it. I got to do that. So it was a good life. I'm sorry, I rambled.
No, that was excellent. Yeah, you get an applause. When you built a business, you built your junior in high school, sophomore in high school, you got a $500,000 revenue business. Did you understand what you were doing, or you're an accidental entrepreneur?
I sold scrap paper from my dad's office when I was 4 years old to get candy money.
So it's part of your DNA.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're born with it.
Do you think that's true of every entrepreneur out there?
Yeah. Yeah, you're either an entrepreneur or you're not. It's genetic.
So what makes you a good entrepreneur? What is it? I mean, you took a huge amount of risk. Whether you knew, like you said, you had to go collect bills, so you started a music store because of inventory you collected. Did you understand the risk that you were taking, or?
Okay, this is
You look back and
this is
think
the
I was
definition
crazy.
of an entrepreneur. You refuse to fail. If I could share one message tonight, it's a simple one. You refuse failure. It's not an option. When you start something, there are 10,000 reasons to fail, to quit. There are so many doors that say exit. There's so many frustrations. There's so many challenges. There's so many barriers you have to get over. There are reasons every day to give up. And an entrepreneur says, I have a hard time with that word. How do you say it? Entrepreneur?
Entrepreneur, you said it fine.
Okay.
I butchered it, but you said it fine.
An entrepreneur says, I am going to be successful. I will find a way. Failure is not an option. I am going to be successful. And you find a way. You know? Everybody else will tell you you can't get over that wall, and you figure out how to. And as long as you have that determination and that commitment and that passion and that desire to be successful, if you work hard enough at it, study hard enough at it, absolutely do not accept the reason why you can't do it, you will succeed.
Are you inspired when people tell you you can't do something?
Oh, I never listen.
You don't take it inside and say, I'm going to prove them wrong?
No, it's not about them, it's about me. Go ahead, challenge me.
So what role does education play in being a business person and being in our society when you look at education?
Education? You mean like college?
Or whatever education means to you. There's lots of kinds of education.
Education's every day, right?
It should be anyway.
Yeah, shucks, I learned a bunch of stuff today. Some of it was good, some of it not so good. Spirit, attitude, determination, values, love and caring for other people, unwillingness to fail. Those are what makes the difference whether you win or lose. Education is a tool that you all have to have, but it doesn't decide whether you succeed or not. It's the emotion of what's inside your soul and your heart and your being that decides whether you win or not. Do I read books? Every week. Do I study? All the time. Am I constantly seeking people who can help me? Sure. But if I didn't have that core desire to be successful driving me, it wouldn't happen.
So when you look at success, you've had financial success, you've had business success, you came from a family that supported you and helped you go. You had a successful upbringing. When at the end of the day, and you've talked about your employees and the culture you've built, how do you measure success at the end of the day? How do you say, I've not proved them wrong, but I've been successful, I haven't given up, those kinds of things?
Did I make a difference in other people's lives? Did I help other people reach their dreams? Do people look at me as somebody that cares about them? I sold my fishing tackle company in 2007, and Memorial Weekend this year, I went back and did a tour at the factory. I'm being self-centered now, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I did a tour of the factory, and everybody came up and gave me hugs and said, we miss you and we wish you were still here. The place is not the same. You cared about us, the new management doesn't. That made my heart sore.
I bet.
And I believe if you walk through our guitar factory and asked anybody, what do you feel about Tom Bedell, they would say he cares about me, I hope. And I think they will. That's way more important than anything else.
When you look back, is there one thing that you're proudest about in your achievement you look back and say, you talked about walking around the factory floor, and I've had the same experience. I went back to plants, and when people hug you and tell you they love you,
Yep.
that there's nothing better than that. And, I remember the first plant I ever left that I ran, big guy, his name was Bear, and he was a huge, he's African American guys. Most people in Mississippi that work for me were. And I bet he hadn't said 3 words for me, and I always had a cigarette dangling out of his mouth. He got off the forklift and came and hugged me, and when I left the plant, and told me he loved me. And that comes back.
Doesn't that mean a lot?
That's the define. If people ask me what the biggest achievement of my life is, I will tell you that Bear hugged me and told me he loved me.
Yeah.
When you look back, is there one point you just say, there's one incident that touched my heart so bad, or so good, I guess I should say, that you remember it, anything that you say, that's the biggest personal achievement I've ever had?
Convincing Molly to marry me, maybe. Getting my kids through their life till I'm 22. I don't know what again, we have an age difference. I promise you, when your kids turn 22 to 24, they become normal people again. But getting them there is huge, right, Pat? So I'm pretty proud of that. I got all 6 of my kids to that point where I'm their friends now and they're living good lives. So that's important. One, you're asking for one. Oh my God.
Is there something that just stands out? I was just curious. It made me think of that when you were talking about walking around the plant floor.
I'm dead on that one. I'm sorry.
Of all the businesses you've done, is there one thing you're proudest of?
I just think how I've treated people and.
When you look back, if you had something to do over again, you say, I messed that one up.
Oh my God.
You only got to pick one. It's not like
You're right.
I got so many that
I feel like I'm in the Catholic booth right now.
Well, I spent lots of time on the other side of the booth, so I know the questions to ask.
It's confession time. Every day, don't you? Every day you say, man, I wish I could have a do-over on that one. I actually, one time I kept a chart because I realized that I wasn't holding myself accountable enough, and so I actually kept a chart. I'd go home at night and I'd say, it was headline do-overs, and I would write down where I screwed up because I thought that would help me not do it repeated. It just got depressing, so I couldn't do it. Oh, shucks. Life is all about, we're human beings, right? One of the things I find the most fascinating is all the business books, the business jocks, they're rational. They talk about all of these ways that you do control things and you. Number one, can I witch out a little bit here?
Go for it.
Okay. Number one, you guys are all in business, most of you, right? Okay? The only reason your business will be successful is if you're doing something different than your competition and it adds value and it adds meaning and it makes a difference. Because if you're all doing the same thing, you're in the commodity business. So the first challenge you have is to say, why is what I'm doing important? How does it make a difference to the consumer or the public or whatever your service is or whatever you're trying to do? And if I can't define a unique niche and make that as big as possible and own it, and people say that's important and I'm willing to pay for that, you don't have a reason to be in business. So I buy the Breedlove Guitar Company, and it was a week or two from being bankrupt. They weren't going to make payroll the next week. I had a choice. I could have waited a couple of weeks, let it go bankrupt and bought it for cheaper. Or I could have bought it like I did when I did and paid all the bills. I'm getting off on the wrong subject, but I'll finish the sentence. So what I did was I bought it, paid all the bills because the people and the suppliers that would have been hurt by bankruptcy, I needed to be successful. And I'd rather honor them and have a company than not. But then the problem I had was I bought a company that didn't have a brand that people cared about. There was a reason why it was in the position it was in. And so we spent the first year trying to figure out why Breedlove, why Bedell, etc. And to carve out unique positions for those brands so that the consumer would say, that's the brand I want. The acoustic guitar business in America grew 5% this year. We grew 30%. If we could have delivered, we would have grown over 70%. We had enough demand to grow over 70%. What was the difference? We created brand stories and brand reasons and product reasons that consumers said, I want to buy that product. We created a reason to be in the marketplace. Okay, you're all saying, so what are those? I'll tell you. Bedell, my own brand that I created in 2009. I decided that I was going to go back to the tree. And I was going to find the tree that grew, that created the tone wood that I built my guitar out of, and I was going to tell that story. So, can I tell you one of the stories?
Please.
A Sitka tree, southeast Alaska. There was a pine cone that got buried in the ground about the time that Columbus landed in America. This is a true story. 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, right? 500 years ago, this pine cone was planted. There became a little sprout. There were deer that wanted to eat it. There were trees all around it. It fought through the forest for water and sunlight to grow. It grew very little each year. Over the course of 100 years, it became a 30-foot tree, competing with all the other trees. A tree fell over beside it, the sun shined out, and it grew a little bit differently. It rained more or less one year, grew a little bit differently. Another 100 years later, it's 60 feet tall. As we think about before the Russians landed in Alaska, that pine cone was growing. That tree grew through all of America being founded, all of America happening, all the colonialism, all the stuff in our lives, World War I, World War II. And in 2012, a windstorm came with that 500-year-old tree and blew it over. And it lay on the forest floor. Think of the life that tree had. And inside that tree is tone wood that makes absolutely extraordinary musical instruments. And I go up to Alaska, and with Brent Cole and his two sons, we tie a chain around that tree that's laying on the ground floor after we've gotten a permit from the National Forest Service. And with his old rickety pickup, we drag that tree out of the forest, and we haul it to his site, and he saws it up into big chunks, and he quarter saws it into tone wood sets. And we put it in a kiln and we dry it. And we ship it to Bend, Oregon. And I get to build a guitar out of that tree. It's magnificent. And I write a book about it with a copywriter, Katrina Gregory, that helped me write it. And we have photographs of it. And guess what I sell that guitar for? $30,000. You know why? It sounds terrific, but the story. I collector buys the story. And they hang the guitar on the wall, and they have the book, and they have the story, and they identify with the experience of the wood that went into that tree. That's branding, right? And that's what we've created here in Bend, Oregon. Okay, what do we do with Breedlove? Are you guys, is this okay?
Yeah.
You guys are okay with this?
Yes.
What do we do with Breedlove? Ken Breedlove was an innovator, and he designed guitars that were totally different than Martin guitars or the old traditional guitars. He built them with different shapes, he built them with different woods, he built them with different construction styles, and so he was the innovator of the acoustic guitar. But Breedlove got in trouble because they were weird. Instead of coming across as innovative and better, they came across as innovative and odd. So we looked at it and we said, okay, we don't want to be Martin, we don't want to be Gibson, the old traditional companies. So how do we turn innovation into something that can be really special? So I decided I was going to become an R&D person. Okay, picture this for me. You're a musician, and you're holding an instrument, and you're playing music on it. And that music that you're playing through that instrument becomes part of your soul, of you creating this music, and the organic stuff from the forest and the trees and all that becomes part of what your music is, and you're relating to all of this. So I said, okay, I'm going to create an R&D department, but I can't lose the soul, the organic connection. The reason why people want an organic guitar, because electric guitars are where you do all the electronics and all this stuff, but that's not the person, the artist making that happen. That's electronics, that's machines, that's science, that's technology. I want to stay pure organic, but I want to bring R&D to it, because Breedlove stands for innovation. So in Cardiff University in Wales, the UK, there's a fellow that has done all these studies on the modes of how, the way guitar, you guys know how guitar works, it's got a top on it that's, that when the strings are activated, it moves like a speaker. So you know speaker, you know how it moves. Okay, that guitar top moves like a speaker, and it moves the air in the box, and that's what creates the sound that comes out of it. But if you put a laser beam in a dark room on the top of that guitar and take pictures of it, it doesn't move like this. It moves like this and this and this, and you get these overtones. And what the ear hears is not just the pure frequency note, like a 220,000 hertz is a G sharp note. But if that's all you heard was 220 hertz, it wouldn't sound pleasing to you, it would sound shrill. What you really hear is the 220, and then you hear all the surrounding hertz that give it warmth and depth and make it sound pleasing to the ear. So I wanted to figure out, how could I use science to shape the way that that top and the back relate to each other to create different sounds that would be pleasing to people? What am I talking about? So I look around at you guys, you all have different shoes on. All right? Why do you have different shoes? Because you have different outfits, different styles, and so forth. Music is the same. When people buy a guitar, they don't want one sound. There's not one sound. There's not one wine that's perfect, right? Depends upon what you're eating, what you're feeling, what you like. So we like different sounds. How could I learn how to make all those different sounds that people like, that the ear hears, and bring science to it so I can predictably do it? There's no company in America that's doing that. We are. So we're understanding the frequency relationship between the top and the back of an instrument, how to do the bracing, how to do the body design, how to do the tone work. And someday, Pat's going to sell me a lot, and we're going to build a beautiful building. And in that building, you're going to be able to come in as an artist, and you're going to be able to play a variety of instruments. We're going to see how you hold the guitar and how you strum it, and and how you perform, the music that you like, and we're going to be able to custom design the sound of an instrument for your music. And nobody else in America can do that. And someday I'm going to have a billboard when you are entering Bend on the highway, and it's going to be the music capital for people that want to have their own instrument designed for them. That's my dream. Thanks for letting me advertise for a minute.
Well said. I have two more questions I get to ask since I'm the moderator, and then we're going to turn it over to these folks. So think of your question, and we'll take your questions in a second. When I talk to people I'm going to interview, I don't tell them what the questions are we're going to talk about. So we haven't met, but I did tell him on the phone one question I was going to ask, and it's my favorite question to ask people. You've been very successful by many measures of success. Are you lucky or good?
Oh, that one's easy. That was funny when you told me you were going to ask that question.
Yeah, you laughed out loud.
Oh, yeah. Well, number one, you're going to think I'm really weird, but I have a friend here, his name's Kevin. He lives on my shoulder, he's my leprechaun, he's been with me forever. He's got a little bit of a ornery side to him, but he talks to me all the time. Every one of us, everyone in this room, every human being, there's luck all around us all the time. Always. But 95% of the people don't recognize it. It's always there. And if you'll just open your mind up to that luck and embrace it and take advantage of it, life is a freeway. It's always there, I promise you. Luck is always there. It's always there. You can be down, you can be saying, this isn't working. What am I going to do? Luck is there, you just got to find it. It's all about luck.
So we get to we established, and I agree with you, there's lots of luck out there, and it's noticing that you have the opportunities to take out there. But we get to you made thousands of decisions in your life, you make hundreds every day. What's the hardest decision you've ever had to make in business?
Firing somebody. It's awful. Have you guys ever had to fire anybody? I mean, you can't let somebody be in the way of your success, so you have to deal with that. Let me tell you, can I talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, please do.
There's a way to love somebody and let them go. Most of us are horrible at letting somebody go, so we don't. And we let somebody be in the way of all the other coworkers in our company to be successful. Nobody's bad, everybody's great, everybody's important, everybody's life is important, but everybody doesn't fit in their role and in every organization. And so, there's one business book. If I were going to recommend a business book, it would be Good to Great. Have any of you read Good to Great? Okay. It's the one business book that makes sense. Why? Because it doesn't say change people, motivate people, make them different than they are. Because have you ever changed your spouse? You don't. You don't change your kids. I'm not going to change. So this whole business thing of how you build cultures and how you build organizations that you're going to motivate and change everybody, it's a whole bunch of bunk. What Good to Great talks about is make sure you have the right people on the bus in the right seats. And if you do, you can be successful. And if you don't, you're not going to be. Do I have time to tell a little bit longer story?
Please do.
Okay. And then I'll get back to where I started. Probably. I took over my father's fishing tackle company in 1979. February 5th, I moved back to my hometown in Iowa. I was single, 29 years old. Got caught in a snowstorm, had to stay in a hotel, get home. I go to work, and I call my dad 2 weeks later, and I go, Dad, this isn't a fishing tackle company, this is a morgue. People are so depressed. The company was almost bankrupt. Invoices that we owed were in the drawer because we didn't have cash to pay them. People had their resumes all updated and were looking for jobs. It was a $20 million company. My first year, we lost $2 million. The mojo was gone. We were in trouble. My nickname in the company, behind my back, was SOB. To my face, it was Son of Burke. My dad's name was Berkeley. There's no way that a 29-year-old son is going to come in and fix a company, right? That's a label that doesn't have a chance. Why did I do it? My dad was in the U.S. Congress. He spent his whole life building up this $20 million company. It was all my mom and dad had. And my dad came to me and said, either I need to retire from Congress and go back and save the business, or Tom, would you go do it for me? Well, what are you going to say to your dad? Of course. So here I am. So I'm there for a few weeks, kind of assessing it. And I go to my sales manager, Doc Ager, and I said, Doc, pick the top 10 customers for fishing tackle in America, set up a trip, and you and I are going to go call them. What are we going to call them for? I said, just make appointments. I just want to see them. Do it. He goes, okay. I had an empty piece of paper, a notebook. Actually, it was one of those yellow legal pads. And we walk into the different customers, and I interviewed them. And I said, tell me what you need in your business that you're not getting. Tell me who your best suppliers are and why, and what it is that they're not doing for you that you would like them to do. Tell me how I can make a difference in your business. Teach me what your needs are so that I can become important to you, because I know right now you don't need me. And I'm not important to your company, and my company is not delivering for you what you need. I want to understand how I can become your best supplier. And people would look at me like, are you crazy? I'd take notes. And then I closed every one of those meetings by saying this. I know you don't need me today, but I have a favor to ask. Would you give me 3 years before you throw me out, so that I can prove to you that I can be your #1 supplier? I'll fast forward and then come back. 5 years later, for 13 years in a row, we were elected the #1 supplier by the distributors in America, by the retailers in America, as the #1 supplier. The trade association quit doing the award because we just won it every year. They got to the point where they said, this is stupid. Okay, how did we do it? I came back home, and I got my top 30 managers into a room for 3 days. Now, they all assumed we were going to go bankrupt. We probably were pretty close to it, right? And I said, we are going to design the world's best fishing tackle company. And people looked at me like, are you nuts? We can't even pay our bills. And I said, anybody that won't participate is welcome to leave the company. But for the next 3 days, we're going to design the model for the world's best fishing tackle company. Now let me fast forward a bit, because I've learned this since then. Learning and motivating is an interesting experience because we're all different. If you take the Myers-Briggs test or whatever, you learn about personalities. Some of us can see a big picture, can be creative, and that's, frankly, that's me. I can dream a house, look at it and say, oh, wow, we can do that. I can dream a product, I can dream this, I can dream that. But I'm not very good at looking at all the details that get to there. Some of us are very detail-oriented, and we need to first build that house brick by brick before we can see it. What that means is we learn differently. So when I say I'm going to create the world's best fishing tackle company, that means something different to everybody. And if you don't actually get into the details of what that is, people don't have that vision inside their head. So we go away on this retreat. I invite people up into teams, and we visualize what would our compensation program be if we were the world's best fishing tackle company. What would our offices look like? What kind of products would we make? What would our bankers think of us? What would our relationship with our bankers be? What would the customers think of us? What would our competitors think of us? What would the people that care about the fish in the water and the streams and the lakes think of us? What would the consumers think of us? What would our brands be? And we spent 3 days in teams and reporting back and so forth, dreaming this whole picture of what our company would be if we were indeed the world's best fishing tackle company. Everybody left after the third day, and I said, I apologize, but I know tomorrow's Sunday. Go to church, do your thing, 1 o'clock, I want you all back here. And at 1 o'clock, I had all the charts laid out there, and I circled in red those things that weren't up to us. How many things do you think were not up to us? The only thing that was not up to us was money. Everything else we could choose to do. We could choose to have that culture. We could choose to have those values. We could choose to make those products and have that R&D and have that relationship with our customers. And we could choose to do all that. That was up to us. And I said, I'm going to create this company. And those of you that want to help create it with me, stay on board. And those of you that don't, get out of the way. So we go back, we have a company meeting. I present this whole vision for where we're going to take our company. And the next day, the receptionist of the company, her name, Joan Stocky, says, Tom, can I see you for a minute? I said, sure, come on in, Joan. And she says, I don't know how to be the world's best fishing tackle receptionist. Because if we were going to be the world's best fishing tackle company, everybody in the company had to do the best job of their job. They had to be better than everybody else in all the other fishing tackle companies in that job, right? You can't have a football team with a guard that lets everybody come through. You all have to be the best. Everybody does. That was the motivation. We're in Spirit Lake, Iowa, a town of 3,000 people, and we're going to create the world's best fishing tackle company. And Joan Stocky says, I want to know how to do that. I handed her the directory of fishing companies, and I said, start calling our competitors, listen to how they answer the phone, ask them questions, learn how they do their job, and let's get together next week and see what you've learned. And she does that. And she comes in my office and she goes, I know how to be the world's, I can do this. I can do it better than everybody I call. And here's my list of what I'm going to do. The receptionist became the inspiration for a lot of people in that company. I would have people that would come into me and they would present a plan for a product launch or a new product design or whatever, and I'd look at them and I'd say, is that consistent with being the world's best fishing tackle company? And they'd say, no, but we don't have the money or the resources or the time. And I would say, you're wasting my time. Come back when you figure out how to do it consistent with being the world's best fishing tackle company. When I sold the company, we had 40% of the U.S. market share. We had 30% of the worldwide market share. We had companies in 22 countries distributing fishing tackle. We were the #1 conservation company to help promote fishery policies to protect our water and our waterways. We were by far the most profitable company in the industry, and we were in Spirit Lake, Iowa, a town of 3,000 people. We did it because we had vision, we had passion, we had care, we had determination, and we cared about each other. Was that story okay?
That was excellent.
Okay.
Anybody have a question? Does Anybody have a question they'd like to ask? So I don't know. I could ask questions all day long. Yes, Paul.
Tom, I think this is kind of timely, what you just brought up. You sold a company that you built and helped your family quite a bit. And a company here in town, a beer distributor, beer manufacturer, just sold to Anheuser-Busch. And they're getting a lot of flack for selling out by selling their company. What's your thoughts about that?
It's tough. It's a very emotional deal. Selling your company for the town is very emotional. I can tell you what I did, which was just a way to kind of mitigate that for me personally. Maybe this is one of my proudest moments you asked you earlier.
All right.
My dad and I sat down and we talked about that very subject. And I said, how am I going to handle this? My dad was supportive of me selling it because he knew I wanted to go off and have other adventures and so forth. I gave 1 year's pay to everybody that worked in the company out of the proceeds from the sale. I gave all of my executives between $1 and $3 million each. I owed them nothing. I mean, I had no agreement or no deal or nothing. But I had the joy of calling my COO into my office and saying, thank you for helping me build this company, and handing him a check for $3 million that he had no idea was coming. And I got to do that for a bunch of executives. So I gave away, I think it was about $13 million out of the proceeds to the people that worked there. I built a $9 million theater on the school. No question, it's the nicest performing arts center in the state of Iowa. Not the nicest one in the high school. I built a $4 million YMCA for the community. So I tried to give back as a way to maybe take care of my guilt about the fact that we were selling it.
You're sure you're not Catholic?
This is kind of a Catholic conversation, exactly. When I go home, I feel welcome, but the town's not the same because they moved the headquarters and they moved the execs off and all the stuff they do. And I don't live there anymore. So it's tough. Yeah, I get it. Does that answer your question?
It does.
So where'd you come up with the name?
Which one?
Two Old Hippies.
That was fun. Molly and I, what started this company we're in now, we retired in 2007. I had all this pile of money and I was stupid with it, did all kinds of dumb stuff. One of which was bought a yacht, and we went off to the South Pacific and went fishing and diving and had a terrific year. But I turned to Molly and I said, I've got to go back to work. This is terrific, but I'm starting to drink at noon and diving and I'm fishing and I'm having all this fun. And it's just, I gotta go back to work. I know that sounds stupid, but she said me too. So there was a music store for sale in Aspen, Colorado. And we bought it. And I did not know that she was an entrepreneur. I did not know it. I knew she was wonderful and loving and incredible person, but I did not know that she was as much of an entrepreneur as I was. Well, we buy the store. It's just a little store about the size of this room. She goes in and completely remodels it. She's putting all this stuff in. We're talking about our branding. We have all these lists of brands. We're going to do guitars, and she's going to do clothing. And so we would go out and tell people we were starting this company and looking for a brand, and we talk about names. And one of the names that I had put on the list was Two Old Hippies. Every time we used that name, people laughed and would tell us a story. Because the secret of branding, when you read a novel, The best authors, they only tell half the story, and they invite your life and your life experiences to be the other half of the story. And so you really engage in that novel because you connect with it. If you're reading a novel and you have no personal experience or relationship with it, you don't connect with it, you probably don't finish it. Because you want to have some kind of branding. That's what branding is, right? You put a brand out there, and there has to be a way that you're inviting the consumer into that relationship so you have a connection. Because without that connection, the brand means nothing to you. It doesn't register. But what happened with Two Old Hippies is everybody either said, I'm an old hippie, or my parents were old hippies, or I'm a wannabe hippie, or that's really weird. And we just started to realize, Pat, that there was a power to that name in terms of a connectivity. And it's really worked. Yeah, it's been huge. And here I sit with a bandana on. Anyway. Yeah.
Are you taking steps to ensure that the two guitar lines don't become overly similar with the same people guiding them?
100%. Separate brand managers, separate production lines, separate brand strategy, separate sales managers, absolutely. Yeah, the old GM story of a Pontiac, a Buick, and a Chevy were all the same. Doesn't work. Oh no, they're totally different. And the market's receiving us that way. Kid Breedlove, who still lives in town, is the persona we use totally on Breedlove. I never show up with a picture on Breedlove or whatever. And I'm the champion of. One of the things about brands that's interesting is people relate to people way more than they relate to things. And so if you can tie a personality to the brand, you can expand it and grow it way faster than if you don't. The example I can share with you that you probably all follow was when Chrysler was almost going down and Lee Iacocca became the image of Chrysler. It really turned Chrysler around. Patagonia, what's the guy's name?
Von Chenard.
Chenard, yeah. His whole personality drives Patagonia, even though he has nothing to do with it anymore. And Kid Breedlove doesn't have anything to do with building our guitars anymore, but he's the personality we use to drive that whole business. So, yeah, good question. Thank you.
Anybody else have a question? I have one more before we wrap it up, unless anybody else does. If you were to leave one thing for if there was a group of young people sitting out here today and you wanted to leave one thing to young people that they walk away with, what would that be? Because I'm where you're at. You gave me inspiration tonight. I have a 15-year-old daughter, and one day she'll turn into a human being again, and we'll be friends. So you gave me inspiration. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. But what would you leave for inspiration for young people?
Life is all about passion. You gotta do what you love. If you don't love it, if you don't care about it, it is not important to you. If you don't feel it in your heart, if you're not willing to, this is too dramatic, but die for it, you're not going to succeed at it. Life is not about great ideas. The biggest myth that young people have is, I have a great idea, I can get rich. There's not anybody in this room, nobody in this room, nobody, that doesn't have a great idea that would work. Every one of you do, but almost everybody in this room will not execute it and make it happen because you're not 100% committed to it. If you were, you'd be doing it and it would be working. So it's all about your passion, your commitment, your determination, your unwillingness to fail. That's what makes life work. That's what makes marriage work. That's what makes parenting work. I don't know about you guys. I find marriage to be one tough son of a gun. But I'm committed to making it work. And if I wasn't, guess what? I'd be single and I'd be unhappy. Is there anybody in here, raise your hand, is there anybody in here that thought marriage should just be a piece of cake? We got one. You're young. You're just waiting. But you know what? Our lives are enriched by the passion to make it work. And that's the same in business and in life.
Well, Tom, thank you very much. I could talk to you all night.